quick reminder that we love our American friends, and this is all in good fun. So if you enjoy these stories, hit that subscribe button for more hilarious moments. I work at a pub in London, and an American tourist asked me what time we close Big Ben for the night. I told him Big Ben is a clock tower and doesn't close. He said, "Yeah, but someone has to turn it off, right?" I explained that it's a functioning clock that runs continuously. He said, "That seems like a waste of electricity." I told him it's a historic landmark. He said, "Still, they should at least dim it at night to save money." His friend agreed and said London could learn a lot about energy efficiency from Las Vegas. I just poured their drinks and walked away. My friend works at Buckingham Palace as a tour guide, and an American woman asked her if the Queen has to pay rent. My friend said no, the Queen lives there. The woman said, "But who owns the building?" My friend explained that the Crown Estate technically owns it. The woman said, "So she's basically squatting?" My friend said, "No, she's the Queen." The woman said, "In America, even rich people pay property taxes." This feels like special treatment. My friend told her that's how monarchies work. The woman said, "Sounds like a scam," and asked if there was a complaint department for the monarchy. I was on the tube when an American couple got on and loudly complained that there was no air conditioning. It was February. The husband said, "How do people survive the summer on these trains?" His wife said, "They probably just don't ride the tube in summer." A British man sitting across from them said, "We do, we just deal with it." The American husband said, "That's Stockholm Syndrome." "You've been conditioned to accept subpar public transport," the British man said. "It gets us where we need to go." The American wife said, "In America, we'd sue." The British man said, "In Britain, we'd rather just sit quietly and put his headphones back in." I work at a fish and chip shop in Brighton, and an American teenager asked me if we had any American food. I asked what he meant. He said, "Like normal food, burgers, hot dogs, pizza." I told him we're a fish and chip shop. He said, "Yeah, but don't you have anything else?" I said no. He said, "What do British people eat besides fish?" I listed some options. He said, "That all sounds gross." His mum told him to just order fish and chips. He said, "But it's fried. That's so unhealthy." His mum said, "You eat fried chicken every day at home." He said, "That's different." I asked how. He said, "Because it's American," and ordered nothing. An American man at a train station in Manchester asked me why all the signs were in English instead of British. I told him English and British aren't different languages. He said, "But you guys have accents." I said, "Accents don't make it a different language." He said, "It sounds different, so it's different." I explained that Americans also have accents. He said, "No, we don't. We speak normal English." I gave up and just pointed him to his platform. He walked away muttering about how confusing British train stations are. I was working at a hotel in Edinburgh when an American guest called the front desk asking if we could turn off the rain. I thought she was joking. She was not. She said, "We're here on vacation and the rain is ruining it." I told her I can't control the weather. She said, "Well, someone must be able to." I asked who she thought controlled weather. She said, "I don't know, the government." I told her weather happens naturally. She said, "In America, they do cloud seeding. You guys should look into it." I told her Scotland is known for rain. She said, "That's not an excuse," and hung up. My cousin works at the British Museum, and an American tourist asked him why everything was so old. He said, "Because it's a museum of history." The tourist said, "Yeah, but why don't you have newer stuff?" He said, "Like what?" She said, "I don't know. iPads, modern art, something from this century." He explained that the museum focuses on ancient civilizations. She said, "That's boring." Museums in America have interactive exhibits and gift shops with good merchandise. He said, "We have a gift shop." She said, "Yeah, but it only sells books and postcards." "Where are the toys?" He directed her to the children's section. She said, "I'm not a child. I just want fun souvenirs," and left to find a Primark. I work at a theatre in London's West End, and an American couple complained that the play had British accents. I told them it's a British production in Britain. The husband said, "Can't they just do it in American accent so we can understand?" I said the actors are British. He said, "They're actors. They can do any accent." I explained that changing accents would change the entire context of the play. He said, "Not if they just pronounce things normally." His wife said, "We paid a lot of money for these tickets." I said the ticket price doesn't include accent changes. They demanded a refund. We denied it. They left a review saying British theatre is inaccessible to international audiences. Quick, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. I was working at a coffee shop in Bath when an American woman asked if we had coffee. I said yes. She asked what kind. I listed our options. She said, "Do you have a venti?" I told her we don't use Starbucks sizes. She looked confused and said, "Then how do I order?" I said, "Just tell me if you want small, medium, or large." She said, "That's too complicated." I stared at her. She said, "Can I just show you a picture of what I want?" She pulled up a photo of a Starbucks cup on her phone. I made her something similar. She took one sip and said, "This tastes different." I said, "Because it's not Starbucks." She said, "False advertising," and left without paying. My mate is a tour guide for the Tower of London, and an American dad asked him if the crown jewels were real or replicas. My mate said they're real. The dad said, "That seems dangerous. What if someone steals them?" My mate said they're heavily guarded. The dad said, "Still, I wouldn't risk it. In America, we'd keep the real ones in a vault and just show people copies." My mate said that would defeat the purpose. The dad said, "Not if the copies are good enough." His son asked if he could try on a crown. My mate said, "Absolutely not." The dad said, "Why not? We paid for tickets." My mate said, "Because they're priceless artifacts." The dad said, "Everything has a price," and tried to Google how much a crown costs. I work at a bookshop in Oxford, and an American student came in asking for books about British English. I showed her the linguistics section. She said, "No, I mean like a translation guide." I said British English and American English are mutually intelligible. She said, "But you guys say things differently." I agreed, but said context usually makes it clear. She said, "What if I say pants and people think I'm talking about underwear?" I told her that would be trousers here. She said, "See, that's exactly why I need a guide." I handed her a British slang book. She flipped through it and said, "This is basically a foreign language," and bought an American English dictionary instead. I was at a National Trust property in the Cotswolds when an American woman asked the volunteer if the thatched roof cottages were real or built for tourists. The volunteer said they're real homes from the 1600s. The woman said, "People actually lived in those." The volunteer said yes. The woman said, "With those roofs? What if it rains?" The volunteer explained that thatched roofs are quite waterproof when properly maintained. The woman said, "That's so primitive. Why don't they just put on normal roofs?" The volunteer said, "Because they're listed buildings and protected." The woman said, "That's stupid. You can't even renovate your own house?" The volunteer said, "Not if it's historically significant." The woman said, "In America, we believe in property rights," and walked off. My brother drives a black cab in London and picked up an American couple going to Heathrow. The husband asked him why he was driving on the wrong side of the road. My brother said, "This is the correct side in the UK." The husband said, "No, the right side is the right side." My brother said, "We drive on the left here." The husband said, "That's inefficient. The whole world should drive on the same side." My brother said, "Most of the world drives on the right, but many countries drive on the left." The wife said, "This is why we should have rented a car." My brother said, you'd still have to drive on the left. She said, we would have figured it out. My brother silently thanked the universe they didn't rent a car. I work at Stonehenge, and an American teenager asked me who built it. I said it's believed to have been built by Neolithic people around 5,000 years ago. He said, so like the Pilgrims? I said no, much earlier. He said, before America was discovered. I said yes. He said, then why did they build it here instead of America? I tried to explain that people didn't know America existed. He said, but if they were so smart they could build Stonehenge, they should have known. I told him continental drift and ocean navigation weren't understood then. He said, sounds like an excuse, and walked away to take selfies. I was on a train to Liverpool when an American man sitting across from me asked if I spoke English. I said yes. He seemed relieved and said, thank God, I haven't met anyone who speaks English since I landed. I told him everyone in the UK speaks English. He said, not the English I know. I asked what he meant. He said, everyone has these thick accents. I can barely understand anyone. I told him that's just regional accents. He said, it's not my fault they can't speak clearly. I said, you're in their country. He said, English is English. They should speak it properly. I moved to a different seat. My sister works at a Tesco, and an American woman asked her where the American section was. My sister said, we don't have an American section. The woman said, what? Every grocery store has an international aisle. My sister said, we have an international aisle. But it's mostly European and Asian foods. The woman said, that's discrimination. My sister said, against who? The woman said, Americans. Where am I supposed to get my ranch dressing? My sister pointed to the salad dressing aisle. The woman said, that's not the same. I need Hidden Valley. My sister said, we don't stock that. The woman said, this is why Brexit happened, and left without buying anything. I work at Shakespeare's birthplace in Stratford-upon-Avon, and an American dad asked me if Shakespeare wrote in English or if his work had been translated. I said Shakespeare wrote in English. He said, but I can't understand it. I explained that language evolves over time. He said, so it's not really English. I said it's early modern English. He said, that's just a fancy way of saying it's not English. I gave him a modern translation guide. He flipped through it and said, why didn't he just write it like this in the first place? I told him he wrote for audiences in the 1500s. He said he should have thought about future readers and asked if there was a movie version. My flatmate works at a pub in York, and an American bloke came in and ordered a beer. My flatmate asked which one. The guy said, just a regular beer. My flatmate said they have 12 on tap. The guy said, the most normal one. My flatmate suggested a lager. The guy said, is it cold? My flatmate said yes. The guy said, American cold or British cold? My flatmate asked what the difference was. The guy said, British cold is like room temperature. My flatmate assured him it was properly chilled. The guy took a sip and said, this tastes warm. Even though it was the same temperature as every other beer. He asked for ice. My flatmate said, ice in beer? The guy said, to make it colder. My flatmate refused. The guy left a review saying British pubs don't understand refrigeration. I was working at Borough Market when an American woman asked me why everything was so expensive. I told her it's a premium food market. She said, in America, markets are cheap. I said, this isn't that kind of market. She said, what other kind is there? I explained it's artisanal and locally sourced. She said, that's just marketing talk for overpriced. I suggested she try a supermarket. She said, I came here for the authentic experience. I said, this is the authentic experience. She said, the authentic experience shouldn't cost this much, and bought nothing. My uncle is a taxi driver in Glasgow and picked up an American couple who asked him to take them to Loch Ness. He said, that's a 3-hour drive. They said, so we'll be back by dinner? He said, No, 3 hours each way. They were shocked, the wife said. But Scotland is small, he said. It's 274 miles away. The husband said, that's nothing. We drive that for weekend trips, my uncle said. Then you understand it takes time. The husband said, yeah. But we didn't think Scotland was that spread out, my uncle said. Did you look at a map? They admitted they didn't. They asked if he could drive faster. He said no. They spent the whole ride complaining about Scottish geography. I work at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and an American tourist asked me why we don't have any American history exhibits. I told her it's a British museum focused on art and design. She said, but America is important too. I said, there are American museums for American history. She said, I know. But I'm here now. I suggested the American Embassy. She said, that's not a museum. I said, then visit the British Library. They have some American documents, she said. I didn't come to London to learn about America. I came to London to see America represented. I told her that doesn't make sense. She said, you're being difficult, and left. I was on a bus in Bristol when an American student asked the driver if the bus took credit cards. The driver said, contactless only. She said, what's contactless? He said, tap your card or phone. She said, I have to touch it to tap it. He said, you know what I mean. She tried to hand him cash. He said, exact change only. She didn't have exact change. She asked if he could break a £20 note. He said no. She asked what she was supposed to do. He said, get off and find change or use contactless. She said, this is so complicated. Another passenger helped her tap her card. She sat down and said, British buses are so high-tech, even though contactless payment has existed for years. My cousin works at Madame Tussauds, and an American family asked him which wax figures were real celebrities and which were just wax. He said, they're all wax. The dad said, all of them? My cousin said yes. The dad said, even the Queen. My cousin said yes. The mum said, how do we know you're not lying? My cousin said, because it's a wax museum. Their kid said, can we touch them? My cousin said no. The kid said, then how do we know they're not real people standing still? My cousin said, because they don't breathe or move. The family spent 20 minutes trying to catch a figure moving. They left disappointed. Alright, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure you're subscribed for more, and I'll see you in the next video.